everybody, to part two of When Jewish Life Goes Viral. We're here today with Rabbi Mendel Kaplan from Chabad Flamingo in Toronto. Rabbi Kaplan recently made a wedding of his eldest son, and we'd like to hear a little bit about a Jewish wedding and what a Jewish wedding looks like in the time of the coronavirus pandemic. So I guess the first question is, why now? What's so urgent about a Jewish wedding, or what's so important that we can't push it off? The world seems so uncertain, and it seems like a time to scale back on things, and yet we see all these people making weddings. So what's so urgent about a Jewish wedding that it has to be held?
In fairness, I think that it's important for me to point out that my son got married was really like we were kind of ahead of the curve. We didn't realize what was going on. Like we flew to Germany. Initially, we left our home and went to the airport thinking everything was still more or less normal. It was in the airport on Wednesday night that we found out that President Trump had gone on television and said that there was no longer going to be flights. I mean, the whole thing sounded to us fantastical. It didn't even make any sense. And we literally had to rearrange flights for my son, the Chassan, and for his brothers. They were all supposed to leave on Saturday night. They did not understand what was going on. The enormity of the changes that the world was about to undergo were just dawning upon us. We really didn't know it hit us. I mean, we got on the plane, and by the time we got to Germany the next evening, after several hours stopover in Warsaw, we already knew that maybe it was 30 or 40% of the guests had canceled, but we still thought that this was going to be a normal wedding, and we did not realize the severity of the situation. It was only Mitzvah Shabbos Saturday night that we heard that the wedding was basically canceled. I mean, they said there was only going to be 50 people allowed to attend the wedding. And now you see chuppahs that are happening in people's backyards or like in the street. And this has almost become normal. I mean, at least one person on Facebook commented and said to me, like, cancel the wedding. What was the big deal? And I think that questions that people pose can only be understood in the context from which they're coming. In the world today, a wedding is a formality. Most young couples are living together for an extended period of time. They're basically married without being married. And then they make a decision at a certain point to formalize things. And from that perspective, it makes absolutely no sense to make a wedding today. So why is it that people are still pressing ahead and making tiny weddings with only immediate family? And the answer is because for us, a wedding is the most powerful statement in our ideology, in our philosophy, in the way we see the world as a place that's ripe for becoming a dir b'tachtonim, for becoming a dwelling place for God. And a wedding is not a detail. It's not a formality. It's a major, major event. And a wedding is the most powerful thing. There's to downsize weddings, to minimize weddings under the circumstances is entirely understandable and mandated and warranted. But the weddings have gone on as they should. You know, do you know that in Bergen-Belsen, which was a concentration camp, in the weeks that followed liberation, there were more weddings that were held during those couple of weeks among survivors than anywhere in the world since we've started keeping records.
Wow. Why is that? What's the significance of
I think that each survivor felt a tremendous urge, a tremendous need to try to rebuild Jewish life. And weddings is the single most powerful building block in Jewish life. And they felt this is what they could do. Our ancestors, our grandparents did not strap bombs on themselves and go around slaughtering the Nazis, even though they very much could have been understood to do so. They didn't wallow in self-pity. They dusted themselves off and they said, we need to rebuild what was lost. One could argue that now is a time when life must go on. We have to keep living. And for us, weddings and living go hand in hand. It's not a formality. It's not an exercise in pomp and circumstance. It's not some cute romantic thing. It's not something for pictures or fun. It's life itself. And when we're able to walk our children to the chuppah, and they're able to, Baruch Hashem, with God's help, begin their lives and to build the next link in the chain that takes us back to Mount Sinai and forward to eternity. That's what life's all about.
What are the crucial parts? It seems like now people are bearing the wedding down to the bare minimum of what is needed for a kosher wedding. So can you explain?
Needed for a bare minimum kosher wedding is a minyan, a quorum. Could be social distancing. In fact, there should be social distancing. This is not a joking matter. We are probably in the most severe and serious of times that we have ever known in our lifetimes. And hopefully, God should remove this terrible situation from us, and we shouldn't know from it anymore. But what's required is within earshot and eyeshot to have a minyan. And if you have a minyan, you have a chassan, you have a kala, and you have two witnesses who are close enough to be able to see the chassan give the ring to the kala. That's basically what you need for a wedding. Well, what happens at a Jewish wedding is that the chassan arrives first, proverbially acquiring a roof over his head, which represents the Jewish home. Because as we mentioned, marriages are not formalities. They're really about building a Jewish home.
So that's under the chuppah.
The chuppah itself becomes a paradigm, a representation of the Jewish home. And the chassan may acquire a roof over his head, but it's only a house. It can't be a home until he's joined by his soulmate. And when the bride arrives, she will begin to walk around the chassan together with her retinue. And the idea is creating the protective walls and imbuing that roof with mission, meaning, and purpose, and warmth and light, turning the house into a home. That this is the home that they will, Eretz Hashem, build together. And Kala is finished, if you will, setting the stage. She takes her place on the right side of the chassan. Bride and groom are standing together now, facing east, which is Jerusalem. And the presence of Hashem, the presence of God, will be evoked through a prayerful formula that's usually chanted or sung. And subsequent to that, there will be, at a Chabad wedding at least, usually they'll read a letter from the Rebbe that the Rebbe sent to one of the parents of the chassan or kala. And some of a custom of Kohanim that will come up and bless the couple, because God says in his Torah that there are people who are empowered to give blessings. And the upshot is that this is a very, very important moment in their life and a time that's ripe for blessings. But all of that is not halachically or legally required. What is legally required is that the rabbi begin the proceedings by reciting a bracha, a blessing, two blessings over a glass of wine. The bride and groom will drink from that glass of wine, internalizing the blessings and the magic of the moment. And in the presence of two witnesses who had been identified prior, the chassan will hand a ring, place a ring on the kala's finger to be exact, and make a declaration saying, I hereby marry you according to the laws of Moses in Israel. And she says nothing, but her silence is deafening. And if properly done, she'll clasp her hand closed, indicating that she has acquired the ring. And in acquiring the ring, proverbially speaking, she gives herself over into the agency of marriage. And now they're no longer two entities, but rather they have become fused. They have become together. He has, so to speak, opened or welcomed her into his reality, into his jurisdiction. And now they are a new jurisdiction, husband and wife.
In such a time when things are so uncertain and there's a lot of suffering going on around us, how do we make a wedding a joyous occasion when we're missing our community, we're missing grandparents, we're missing key family members?
I had a choice to make. My wife and I had a choice to make. We were either going to focus on the fact that our parents weren't there. We were going to focus on the fact that this is not the wedding that we had hoped for and dreamed of. It's our first wedding and so on and so forth. Or we were going to focus on the chassan and kala and the bride and groom. And it's a mitzvah to bring joy to a bride and groom, which I never really understood fully until that night. And we focused our energies entirely on the bride and groom. And it was only about bringing them joy and only about bringing them a sense of exhilaration and excitement as they're about to begin their new life together. And in doing so, I was able to put myself into a different headspace. I didn't think about anything other than the responsibility that I had as a parent to bring joy to my son and to his bride. And my wife did the same. And, Baruch Hashem, we came through it. I want to finish off by just mentioning that we, the Jewish people, are ever the optimistic nation. And despite the fact that we face the most daunting of challenges, We've always looked forward optimistically to a brighter and a better future. And that has a lot to do with our faith in the coming of Mashiach, and that the world will be not only healed, but made whole and perfect. And that Jewish weddings have a lot to do with that. The Jewish wedding is a major step forward in the repairing of the world, as it were. And it hastens the coming of Mashiach. So when you have the opportunity to hasten the coming of Mashiach and redemption and bring about a world that'll be filled only with happiness and good health and prosperity and universal God consciousness, you do what has to be done and you move forward. May it be in our time speedily. The Pedro will be made.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, and Shabbat Tov.
You're very welcome. Shavua Tov.